Hi, welcome to the world of quantitative research. Today, we're going to dive into a topic, drawing conclusions and recommendations for quantitative research. So, whether you're preparing for your final paper or you're wrapping up a research project, this step is crucial. So, let's get started.
Our objectives for this lesson will first understand the distinction between the conclusions and recommendations in research writing, apply the proper tone and language when drafting both sections, acknowledge the ethical considerations involved in writing conclusions and recommendations, critically evaluate the alignment between research findings and proposed recommendations, and finally, develop skills in formatting conclusion and recommendations in alignment with academic standards.
What exactly is a conclusion and recommendation in a research paper, and why are they so important?
A conclusion synthesizes all the findings of your study into clear, concise summary. Think of it as an argument, where you explain what your data says and why it matters.
Recommendations. Suggest future actions based on your findings.
Here are some steps to help us write a good conclusion. Restate the research problem. Remind the readers of the problem your study aimed to address. An example of this is this study examined the impact of social media usage and academic performance among STEM students.
Use both descriptive statistics, percentage, and means, and inferential results, significance tests, and summarizing key findings. An example of this is
the analysis revealed that increased social media usage correlates negatively with academic performance. P is less than 0.05.
Relate findings to your research questions. Provides direct answers to your research questions or hypothesis. An example of this:
the hypothesis that high social media usage negatively impacts grades were supported by the data.
address limitations. This pertains to being transparent about your studies. Constraints like small sample size and narrow geographic focus. An example of this:
findings may not be generalizable due to the limited sample size if only one senior high school.
Highlight the significance. Explain the broader application of your findings. An example of this:
This research emphasizes the need for balanced social media usage among students to optimize academic success.
Writing a strong conclusion is one of the most important steps in quantitative research. It is where you synthesize your findings and directly address the research questions. To understand this better, let's work through an example together.
Imagine this. You conducted a survey to your school to identify students' preferred study spots. Here's what the data shows.
60% preferred studying at the library, 25% preferred studying at home, and 15% preferred studying at coffee shops.
First, we will gather descriptive data. If we had inferential data, like a statistical test to determine why students preferred one place over another, we would include that. For now, let's stick to the descriptive data.
Next, we synthesize these results with the existing knowledge or the broader context. For example, previous research might suggest that students prefer quiet, resource-rich environments for studying. Our findings support this idea as the majority selected the library. Based on the data, we can conclude that the study revealed that library is the most preferred study spots among students, followed by homes and coffee shops. This preference aligns with the need for quiet and access to resources, as supported by prior studies.
Now, what is a recommendation in a research paper? Recommendations are action-oriented solution or suggestion based on your study's findings. They guide how can your research be applied on real-world setting or inspire future studies.
Theoretical recommendations. These are the suggestions for expanding theories and frameworks in future studies. An example of that is further research should investigate how cognitive load applies to its multiple use in social media platforms.
Methodological recommendations. This type of recommendations focuses on improving the method for similar research studies in the future. Example, future studies should include a larger sample size to improve statistical power.
Practical recommendations are actionable steps stakeholders like schools, businesses, and government can take these.
Here's the scenario. You're designing your ideal classroom. What we're about to mention are the 5 items that you can include, but you need to rank them from the most important to least important. Ready? Here they are. Take a moment to think about your rankings.
Got your list? Awesome. Now let's think about what those rankings might say about your ideal learning environment.
If you rank high-speed Wi-Fi at the top, you probably value staying connected and having quick access to online resources. If comfy chairs were your number one, maybe comfort helps you focus better and makes long study sessions more manageable. If textbooks were your top pick, you might prefer having reliable, tangible resources and value traditional methods of studying. If a large window with natural light was your favorite, perhaps you thrive in bright, open spaces and feel more energized in environments with connection to the outdoors. If a whiteboard marker ranked highest for you, you might enjoy visual learning, brainstorming, or teaching concepts to others.
This exercise shows that even in the simplest data, we can find bigger insights. That's what writing conclusions in research is all about, finding meaning in your data. Now let's keep that preferences in mind as we're going to build on this concept as we move forward.
Here's how to craft thoughtful recommendation based on your study's conclusion. First, start with your draft conclusion. Your recommendation should flow logically from your findings. Acknowledge study limitations. For instance, if your study doesn't account gender differences, suggest that future research address this gap.
Re-examine literature gaps. Identify unanswered questions in your field and suggest further investigation.
Finally, propose future action. Provide clear, actionable recommendation for stakeholders.
Example process. Conclusion. Frequent use of social media during study hours negatively impacts academic performance. Recommendations. Theoretical. Further studies should examine the effects of different social media platforms on focus and retention. Methodological. Incorporate a longitudinal design to study long-term impacts of social media usage. Practical. Teachers should incorporate digital detox strategies during exam to help students focus.
Talk about why ethics are so important. Ethical considerations guide your decision making. This ensures that your findings and recommendations are valid, unbiased, and fair. For example, if your study involves human participants, you need to ensure that you haven't overlooked any potential harm or exploitation in the process. This could include things like privacy concerns or emotional distress.
When writing conclusion and recommendations, it's essential to remain ethically responsible. Your research may impact policies, practice, or even people's lives, so it's important to ensure your conclusion and suggestions reflect that responsibility.
When writing conclusion, you should be transparent about any limitations related to ethics. For example, if your study could not fully address all demographic groups due to budget or time constraints, acknowledge these limitations. You might say, while this study provides valuable insights, the sample size did not include participants from certain socioeconomic backgrounds, which may limit the validity of the findings.
Next, let's talk about the tone and language of your conclusion and recommendations. Both should maintain a formal and professional tone. This ensures that your research is perceived as credible. While it is important to be clear and concise, you also need to avoid overly casual language. Instead of saying, "The results show that a lot of people like studying at home," you could write, "The findings indicate a significant preference for home study environments among participants." This also means avoiding emotional or biased language. For example, instead of saying, "The study definitely proves that online learning is superior to in-person classes," we should say, "The study suggests that online learning may offer certain advantages and flexibility, but further research is needed to confirm these findings." This shows that you are presenting facts, not personal beliefs.
Your conclusion and recommendations should always maintain a formal and professional tone. This ensures that your research is perceived as credible. While it's important to be clear and concise, you also need to avoid overly casual language. Instead of saying, "The results showed that a lot of people studying at home," you would write, "The findings indicate a significant preference for home study environments among participants."
To further understand the importance of the ethical conditions, tone, and language, let's have another activity. I'm going to show you 2 sample statements, and your task is to spot the issues in each statement. Ready? Let's go! Can you spot the problem? That's right. This statement ignores the fact that honesty and integrity are critical in ethical research. The researcher is dismissing data validity based on assumptions rather than addressing the ethical issue of how data was collected. In research, Even if results fit expectations, we must respect the honesty of participants and treat their data responsibly.
Can you spot the issue here? The language is uncertain and unprofessional. Instead of clearly stating findings, this researcher is using vague terms like guess and I'm not sure, which reduces the credibility of the work. In a conclusion or recommendation, we need to be confident, direct, and clear. A better version might be, the results of the method suggest limited effectiveness in this context, and further testing it is required to evaluate its overall utility.
Here's a quick checklist to make sure your conclusion and recommendations are on point.
Let's quickly cover some pitfalls to watch out for. Repeating results section. Your conclusion should summarize, not repeat. Overgeneralizing findings. Stay within the scope of your data. Vague recommendation. Be specific. Suggest how and why, not just what.
Conclusions should synthesize your findings and tie them directly to your research questions and objectives. Remember, this isn't just a summary. It's an opportunity to interpret and discuss the significance of your results. Recommendations are practical suggestions for future action based on the conclusion. They should be actionable, realistic, and grounded in the evidence you've gathered.
We also explore the importance of ethical considerations. Always ensure your conclusion and recommendation are fair, unbiased, and responsible. Don't forget to highlight the limitations of your study and suggest improvements for your future research.
Finally, we discuss the tone and language that you should use: clear, formal, and objective. Avoid personal opinions and ensure your language is direct and to the point. Your recommendation should be practical, realistic, and specific to make them useful for decision makers.
That's it! Writing conclusions and recommendations doesn't have to be overwhelming. Just remember to synthesize and summarize your findings, answer your research questions, and offer actionable and thoughtful recommendations. Thank you for joining us. Now it's your turn to put these tips into practice. Bye!